Welcome to Grimfire,
They told you to kneel,
where every
but you
shadow
smiled,
hides a story.
because deep down,
Subscribe
you knew.
now and
They were
step
afraid
into
you'd
the
stand.
darkness.
They threw you into the fire, hoping you'd scream, but instead, you laughed. Not the kind of laugh they understand, the kind that tastes like smoke, like ashes, like every time they buried you alive and forgot. You were the dirt. You didn't survive the fire, you became it. They always say evil has a face, but yours, it was carved by betrayal. Every crack in your soul was a gift they left behind. Smiles that lied, hands that stabbed, eyes that watched you drown and whispered, swim. You didn't get lost in the dark, you memorized every corner. And when they thought you'd fade, you rewrote yourself in the language of storms. Silence? That's where you trained. You weren't born like this. No one is. You were sculpted, cut down, mocked until the mirror stopped showing mercy. You looked into your reflection and saw a question the world couldn't answer. A grin sharpened by chaos. You didn't lose your mind, you upgraded it. Sanity was a prison anyway. Now, you see clearer in madness than they ever did in light. The devil didn't come to tempt you, he came to study. Sat across from you in the dark and asked, how did you do it? Because what crawled out of that abyss wasn't mortal. You didn't escape hell, you made it beg for terms. And when he leaned in, hoping to understand your chaos, you leaned closer and whispered, you should have killed me when I was quiet. They want to label you, call you wicked, broken, but they forget. Clowns wear masks for the show. You wear yours because it's the only face they left you. Laughter became your revenge, smiles became your scars, and every joke, it's a truth they're too fragile to face. You're not insane, you're the only one telling the punchline straight. So now, when hell stares back, you don't blink. You don't flinch. You grin. Because the worst already happened. And you're still here. Dressed in madness, coated in silence, wrapped in every wrong they ever did to you. You're not looking for redemption. You're not here to be saved. You're here to watch the whole damn world burn. Beautifully, they thought they shattered you. They didn't know broken glass cuts deeper. They didn't just hurt you. They dismantled you. Piece by piece, they stripped away your innocence, your trust, your softness. But what they didn't realize was that you weren't made of glass. You were made of mirrors. And every crack just showed them a version of themselves they couldn't stand to face. Pain didn't crush you. It programmed you. While others begged for healing, you dissected your wounds. You studied your scars like blueprints, rewiring every nerve, every trigger, every weakness. You didn't just survive the trauma. You weaponized it. Now every fracture they left in you bleeds calculation. Every tear they mocked became part of your strategy. They wanted you emotional, so you became surgical. They wanted you soft, so you turned cold. The world taught you how to feel shame for your darkness, but you stopped apologizing. You realized that monsters aren't born from evil. They're reforged in betrayal. And in that moment of rebirth, you stopped flinching. You started watching. You didn't go bad. You woke up. You saw the rules, the manipulation, the fragile games of cowards in masks, and instead of trying to play along, you flipped the board. You didn't need permission. You needed silence. Because evolution doesn't happen in applause. It happens in isolation, in rage, in silence so loud it breaks reality. This world didn't break you. It upgraded you. And now, the same people who dismissed your pain are starting to feel your silence crawl across their skin like a warning. They didn't break you. They built a new version of you. And that version doesn't bleed anymore. It hunts. They told you to stay quiet. You sharpened your silence into a scream. They handed you a script at birth. Be polite. Stay humble. Obey the rules. Never speak until spoken to. And like a good soldier, you followed. You wore the mask. You smiled when it hurt. You played small so others wouldn't feel threatened. But deep inside, something growled. Something ancient, something real. They fed you the same poison dressed as wisdom. Be patient. Be kind. Don't fight back. It'll pass. But it didn't pass. The pain piled up like bodies in a forgotten war. And while they told you to turn the other cheek, they kept swinging. Until one day, your silence snapped its leash and learned how to bite. The truth. You were never weak. You were trained to believe you were. Society didn't want you awake. It wanted you tamed, domesticated, and you gave them what they wanted, until the lies stopped working, until your soul opened its eyes and whispered, "This cage is not my home." You didn't just stop believing the lies, you devoured them. You tasted every fake smile, every backhanded compliment, every empty promise, and they fueled your hunger, not for revenge, but for clarity. You saw the patterns, the manipulation, the conditioning, and instead of shrinking, you rose. Now you don't play nice. You don't shrink to fit their comfort. You grow fangs. You tear through the illusions with a grin on your face, because once you wake up from their dream, you don't go back to sleep. You become their nightmare. And the next time they try to serve you lies, you'll eat them raw and grin with blood on your teeth. He's not scared of saints. He's terrified of the sinner who sees clearly. You weren't born wicked. You were made aware. Aware of the games, aware of the masks, aware that this world isn't ruled by the righteous, but by the ruthless, who smile while bleeding others dry. And in that moment of awareness, you didn't find peace. You found power. Quiet, sharp, unshakable. The devil didn't show up to tempt you, he showed up to study you, because you weren't just playing in the dark. You understood it. You didn't sell your soul. You owned it. No chains, no shame. No prayers for mercy, just a calm fire behind your eyes that said, "You should have killed me before I woke up." See, the devil fears one thing, not purity, but clarity. Saints walk in light and beg for forgiveness. But you walk through shadows with eyes wide open and dare the darkness to look back. You're not asking for salvation. You're not searching for a throne. You're here to remind the underworld who taught it how to burn. The tables turned the moment you stopped running. When you realized you are the chaos, not the victim, not the pawn, the storm. And when hell saw that you weren't flinching anymore, it whispered your name. Not out of curiosity, but out of fear. Because now, you don't kneel to devils. You make them tremble. You didn't inherit the fire. You replaced it. And the throne? It's cracking under your shadow. You stopped running from the dark. Now you use it as a weapon. They told you to fear your rage, to hide your envy, to bury your pain beneath forced smiles and hollow affirmations. But you learned early. What they call weakness is raw fuel. You stopped apologizing for your fire. You started directing it. You didn't silence your demons. You studied them. You mapped every impulse, every crack in your soul. While the world painted its fake perfection, you looked in the mirror and said, "Let's begin." Not with denial, but with total, ruthless ownership of who you really are. That bitterness you carried, you forged it into focus. That jealousy, you turned it into drive. That trauma they mocked, you turned it into leverage. Now, when others hesitate, you move like a shadow with teeth. Because you're not weighed down by pretending to be good. You're focused on being effective. Hope blinds most people, makes them wait, beg, dream. But you see the world exactly as it is, unfair, brutal, wired for the bold. And that clarity? It's your edge. You no longer chase light, you bend darkness into strategy. You are not broken, you are calculated. Every scar a blueprint, every flaw a signal. And when they ask how you rose so fast, so cold, so untouchable, you'll smile and say, I stopped hiding what they feared most and turned it into a kingdom. You're not heartless. You just stopped bleeding for those who stabbed you. There was a time you gave chances like candy, a time when you believed apologies meant change and loyalty would be returned. But life taught you better. The same hands you fed came back with knives, and still, you offered more, until one day, something snapped, and you didn't feel guilt. You felt clarity. Mercy was the lie they weaponized. They told you to be the bigger person, while they cut deeper every time. But now you see it for what it was. Emotional blackmail wrapped in false virtue. You didn't go cold. You just stopped giving warmth to the ones who only came close to steal it. You don't hate them. You just don't answer anymore. You no longer explain your silence, your distance, your rise. You don't owe closure to people who only opened doors to hurt you. Forgiveness was the chain, but silence, that's the blade. This isn't bitterness. It's evolution. You've outgrown the need to be understood. You've buried the version of you that begged to be seen, and what rose in its place is something they never prepared for, a soul armored in boundaries and a heart that no longer leaks for the unworthy. You didn't become cruel, you became selective, and now your kindness is earned, not expected, because mercy is for those who never turned your love into a weapon. What walked out of the fire was never meant to be human again. They talk about healing like it's this peaceful thing. Sunlight, closure, acceptance. But you didn't walk through a garden. You clawed your way through hell. There were no safe spaces, no gentle affirmations, just silence and the sound of your own soul breaking itself apart to rebuild something stronger. You didn't mend. You morphed. This wasn't about recovery. It was about destruction. You burned every part of yourself that was built on approval, guilt, and self-doubt. You buried your innocence with your own hands, and when the smoke cleared, what stood there wasn't a survivor. It was a force. The old you would have asked for understanding. The new you doesn't ask for anything. It takes. It moves. It watches. The world looks at you now and senses something different. Something they can't name, but feel in their bones. You're not better. You're changed. The type of changed that doesn't flinch, doesn't hesitate, doesn't explain. People who knew you before say, you've changed. And they're right. You're unrecognizable. Because healing didn't save you. Oblivion did. You didn't patch up the old version. You replaced it with something that remembers every fire and never forgets the burn. You didn't heal. You evolved. And what you are now isn't meant to be gentle. It's meant to reign. They told you to move on. You decided to take over. Peace was never the prize. Peace is what they offer the broken to keep them quiet, to convince them that silence is strength, that letting go is healing. But you saw through that illusion. You didn't come here to make peace with what happened. You came to own it. You're not chasing calm. You're building control over your thoughts, over your instincts, over the life they tried to script for you. Every time they told you to let go, what they really meant was stay in your place. But you've burned that place to the ground. You don't move on, you move through. They fear people like you, not because you're loud, but because you're focused. Because you don't beg, you don't hope, and you don't explain. You act, you decide, you take. You've reclaimed the one thing they never wanted you to realize you had, autonomy. And with it, you no longer ask for a seat at the table. You build your own throne from the bones of every time they said you can't. This isn't revenge. This is occupation. A full takeover of the space they swore you'd never enter. of the mind they tried to break, of the voice they tried to mute. You're not just surviving anymore. You're commanding. And the ones who said you were too intense, too much, too wild, they're watching now. Quietly. Because deep down, they always knew. You weren't built for peace. You were built to rule. And now the world doesn't just feel your presence. It answers to it. You became what they whispered about, and now they kneel. They laughed when you were quiet, mocked when you were kind, poked, prodded, tested your limits like you were nothing but prey. But they never expected you to wake up. They never thought the storm they summoned would wear your face. You didn't start as the monster. You started as the innocent, the loyal one, the one who stayed when you should have walked, who forgave when you should have burned it all down. But every betrayal carved something out of you, and eventually there was nothing left to lose, just raw intent and sharpened clarity. The irony, the thing they feared most, you becoming ruthless, was the thing they forced into existence. You didn't rise from hate, you rose from the wreckage of their choices. You became the embodiment of consequence. Not loud, not angry, just inevitable. Now they tremble, not because you seek revenge, but because you don't need to. You're past rage, past proving points. You carry your silence like a crown. And in every room, in every glance, they feel it, the weight of what they built when they broke you. You were the warning they ignored. Now, you're the reality they serve. No apologies, no mercy, no return. Because the throne wasn't given to you. It was forged in your name when they mistook your kindness for weakness. Power doesn't scream, it just walks in and everything bows. You never needed to raise your voice, never needed to prove you were dangerous. Real power doesn't beg to be seen, it just is. It moves like smoke, speaks without sound, and reshapes the room with nothing but its presence. And you mastered that language. You didn't dethrone the devil with rage or noise. You did it with stillness. With eyes that didn't blink, with steps that didn't chase, but claimed. Because when you walk in full awareness of who you are, what you've endured, and what you now command, the world stops pretending it doesn't notice. You made hell flinch not by playing its game, but by refusing to play it all. You outgrew the battlefield. You turned yourself into a realm no demon could enter without kneeling. And when the darkness looked into you, expecting chaos, it found something worse: control, cold, calm, untouchable. People mistake volume for strength, but the loudest ones are often the weakest. You became so silent, so focused, so complete, that even the chaos couldn't corrupt you. You didn't come to compete, you came to replace. And even the devil had to step aside, because something older, colder, and far more dangerous had arrived. You didn't scream, you didn't beg, you simply became, and the world adjusted. Because power, this real, doesn't knock, it walks through the door. And everything bows. While others panic in the storm, you became the lightning. Most people run when the ground shakes. They hide when the winds howl, beg for normal when reality cracks open. But not you. You stood still, eyes wide, fists calm, while everything collapsed around you. And in that moment, you didn't survive the storm. You synchronized with it. You learned something they never teach. Chaos is not destruction for the sake of ruin. It's a language, a rhythm. And while others prayed for peace, you danced in the fire. You didn't resist the chaos. You became it. Lightning doesn't ask permission. It strikes. And now, so do you. Every time the world tried to throw you off balance, you adapted. Not by clinging to safety, but by becoming formless. You don't fear change. You weaponize it. You use instability as a ladder, uncertainty as armor. While others crumble under pressure, you sharpen into something more precise. You're not the victim of the storm, you're the anomaly within it. The eye that sees clearly, the calm grin in the middle of destruction. And wherever you go now, the rules warp around you. Not because you demand it, but because reality senses that you no longer obey anything but truth. You don't just move through chaos, you command it. And in a world that fears the unpredictable, you remain untouchable because you are not the storm's victim. You're its masterpiece. You didn't play to win. You played to burn the board. They invited you into the arena thinking you'd follow the rules, smile, shake hands, stay in line. But you were never here to compete. You were here to rewrite the entire structure, because once you saw how the game was rigged to keep you small, obedient, invisible, you didn't want a seat at the table. You wanted to flip it. You stopped chasing their trophies when you realized they were designed to keep you chasing forever. Recognition, applause, acceptance. Tools to distract you from the real goal. Dominion. You didn't want to be seen as the best. You wanted to be unchallenged. So you stopped asking, stopped waiting, stopped conforming. You broke their rules with silence, their expectations with presence. While they played checkers, you dismantled the board and used it to build your throne. Not to be crowned, but to become the place where the game ends. Now they scramble to adapt, to understand, to catch up, but it's too late. You're not in the race anymore. You became the terrain, the one who bends reality to fit their will, the one who turned ashes into architecture. Because some don't want to win. Some don't even care to compete. Some are simply here to end the game entirely and stand over the ruins, unmoved, unbothered, Call it evil, call it rebellion, you call it becoming. They'll say you've changed, that you're cold now, dangerous, too much. But they weren't there when the world buried you alive. They didn't hear the silence you screamed into. They only see what you are now, and it terrifies them. Because you didn't crawl out of that grave to fit back into their story. You came back to end it. You were never the villain. You were the one who kept forgiving while they kept cutting. You were the light they drained, the loyalty they betrayed, the softness they exploited. And when it was all gone, when your soul lay shattered, they expected you to fade. But you didn't. You resurrected. Not as who you were, but as who you had to become. They call it darkness, you call it clarity, because you no longer play roles handed to you by cowards. You define yourself by action, by presence, by the fact that you rose not with vengeance, but with vision. They can't understand it, so they label it evil. But this isn't malice. It's the final form of someone who's done being controlled. Now, when you move, the world shifts. Not because you demand attention, but because your energy rewrites the room. You're not trying to be liked. You're not here for peace. You're here to reclaim the fire they left in your chest and burn every false identity to ash. This isn't your villain arc. It's your arrival. And the ones who cursed your name will live long enough to whisper it in awe. Legends are remembered, but monsters? There was a time they laughed at your name, mocked it, misused it, spoke it like it held no weight. But that was before you shed your skin, buried your innocence, and let the darkness sculpt what the light never could. Now, they don't speak your name at all, not because they forgot, but because they remember too well. You didn't chase legacy. You became it, not through fame, not through praise, but through presence. You moved through the world like smoke and steel, quiet, unbreakable. And somewhere along the way, they stopped looking for your downfall and started hoping they'd be spared from your return. They tried to erase you, to rewrite your narrative in their favor. But history doesn't forget the one who turned their pain into power. The one who didn't just survive the fire, but stepped out of it with a match still burning in their hand. You weren't made for memorials. You were made to haunt the system that tried to contain you. Now your name lingers in rooms long after you leave, not in stories, in warning signs, not in praise, in silence too loud to ignore. You didn't ask for influence. You bent reality until it shaped itself around your shadow. That's not fame. That's dominion. Because legends fade with time, but what you've become, that doesn't fade, it echoes, and every echo sounds like your name. Carried in silence, feared in every corner you once walked through unnoticed,